I pledge allegiance Thank you all for joining us. I apologize for the overrun in our executive session. Betty, if you could let I don't think anybody can hear me. Betty, if you could let the record reflect that the board had to meet in executive session to consider discussions regarding proposed pending or current litigation and collective negotiations pursuant to Article 14 of the Civil Service Law, please. Our first item, trustees, is the approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second? Questions? All in favor? Thank you. Second is the approval of the treasurer's report. Do I have a motion? Second? Does anyone have questions? All in favor? Thank you. It brings us to the report of the superintendent, Dr. Giarrizza.
Thank you very much. So good evening and Happy New Year to everybody.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so we have been back for some total of 4 or 5 work days since the new year. We've moved, since we've been back, we've been focused on the budget development process, which we'll dig into tonight a little bit. We've also been turning our attention from bond information sessions to implementation of the capital project. And so we had a kickoff meeting this week to talk about some of the schematic design process, timelines. We will have some minimal amount of work that will happen in this upcoming summer, largely because it's going to take us really quite a bit of time to do the design work and and get through the state ed process. So there's a couple of projects that we'd like to see happen, mostly around safety and security, that we can get moving off the ground. Our architects are now reviewing those requests and will get back to us in another couple of weeks with what's doable. But we are looking at SCD first, the first set of SCD submissions in the fall, in this upcoming fall. Largely, and most of that work will involve the middle school work. That'll be the first big round of capital work that will happen. So once we have a better sense of the staging, we'll bring that back to the board, let you know where that's moving along. But it's super exciting. We're really looking forward to getting started. They are not here tonight. We will have them here at a meeting, an upcoming meeting. But yesterday, we had 2 Regeneron semifinalists named in the district, which is a really big deal. It is quite amazing. Keaton Denseglio and Kira McCreary, and most of the words in the title of their work I can't even pronounce, so I'm not going to pretend to know more than I know, but it is really quite impressive, and I will look forward to having them here so they can talk more about their work. Tonight we have our part 2 of our student achievement report, K through 12, and so we'll build upon the good, successful work that we did a few weeks ago before the break, and tonight we welcome our humanities administration to talk about that. The budget development process we'll get into a little bit more in a little while. And outside of that, we've just been, moving things along and trying to have a great second half of the year.
Great.
So we've been very lucky, knock on wood, we've been very lucky with weather so far.
You would say that in public.
Exactly. So thank you all very much. And as far as LIPA is concerned, that is kind of still in a state of unknown, and we continue to work with our legislators and our attorneys to try to figure out what is going to be the next right step for our system as it unfolds.
Great. Thank
Okay?
you.
You're very welcome.
The report of the STO, please. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. So this past Tuesday, there was a forum for seniors and juniors, and we had alumni come in and answer questions about, for seniors, it was more based on college life and getting accustomed, getting used to being at college. And then for juniors, it was more focused on applying for college and supplementals and stuff like that. And it was very successful, and a lot of people felt really good about it. And then coming up, we have a fundraiser where we are going to be selling socks, and the money is going to be going to a charity. And so that's what happened this past week.
How cool are your socks?
Oh, they're very cool. Very cool.
Like how cool?
Very. I mean, you could buy a pair if you want.
I will buy a pair.
Oh,
But
please.
I like to wear cool socks.
Oh,
All right.
they're awesome. Yeah.
You know, and Mr. Dennis likes to wear cool socks.
Let
Right?
me get you a pair too.
You're buying
I've seen
socks.
Mr. Cousins in cool socks every now and
That's
again
just
too.
why,
but-
why not call out everybody in the audience? Make some money for that, you know.
Exactly. Put me down for 3. Cool.
Thank you. We appreciate the
Thank you.
report. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
coming.
Have a good one.
Have a great night.
Thanks. And so this brings us to the moment we've all been waiting for, our district report on student achievement on the humanities side. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for the time and the space again to talk about student achievement. Tonight, we're going to be focusing on humanities, K through 12. So I want to thank Ms. Small, Ms. Ritter, Dr. Titone, Ms. Aguiar, Mady, and Mr. Gordon for being the leads on this report and putting together a great presentation. I just wanted to give a quick overview before we get started. Last night, I had the privilege of speaking with 14 North Shore students in the first meeting of the Superintendent's Teaching and Learning Advisory Committee. And what's unique about this committee is it came out of the strategic planning committees from last year, but it's a kind of a shared decision-making committee on instruction that has more students in membership than adults. So it's really focused on harnessing and leveraging the student voice. The discussion was clarifying and enlightening and also affirming. We were able to hear the voices of our students as they discussed their most meaningful learning experiences in and out of school. And Ms. Small was there with me. She created the charter for the committee, the mission statement, and facilitated last night's meeting. So here are some of the things that students said, their most relevant learning experiences. And we were very clear that it could be outside of school. They talked about working at Mount Sinai Hospital in the summer, making bottle ecosystems, having Expert Friday in which each student presented on a topic that they were an expert on to the whole class, community service, learning and growing through trial and error and completing a computer science program, the third grade talent show, and writing a play about the American Revolution. And then we asked students about the type of learning experiences that they'd like to see more of in the North Shore schools. And they talked about more independence, more group discussions and Socratic seminars, more choice, more unstructured time, less structured time, current events discussions, and hands-on service and classroom work. We're excited about working with students to harness their ideas and their feedback and follow up meetings. We're going to have 5 more meetings this year. But what's striking about the student-led discussions yesterday is that it's very similar to the list of characteristics that you'll hear about this evening. This evening, our humanities team will focus on engagement, choice, perseverance, and agency. We call this, like we did in the STEAM Achievement Report presentation, the 5th dimension of achievement. This is the component that research has shown can impact all other forms of achievement, making learning meaningful, transferable, and empowering while also displaying strong performance on assessments. Process is so important. In the backup report that was provided to you on Tuesday, we presented 4 other dimensions of achievement in humanities, the same dimensions we did for STEAM. Student and program achievement last school year in a single point in time, comparisons to similar school districts in the last school year, student and program growth within the North Shore schools over the last several years, and the equity of achievement and participation. While the data in the report shows that our comparative performance in proficiency is comparatively at the highest level, we do have room for growth in mastery of achievement, subgroup performance for students identified with a disability, ENL students, and low-income students who are often assessed in their direct areas of challenge, English, the English language, American culture. So part of that growth is organizing more specific local data. The more data that we dug into for this report, the more we realized that we needed to collect in the future, that there were holes in some of our data gaps. And so that's what we need to continue to do, to look for longitudinal trends, but also so we can focus on needed instructional curriculum changes. One area that we mentioned in the STEAM report was universal design for learning as a framework for teaching and instructional observation, but also for curriculum, and also looking at teaching for transfer and application. Also related is our revising of our district's RTI plan. Chris Marino and I are co-chairs of the RTI task force, and we will be drafting a new RTI plan that will include specific elements. One of those elements that pertains to tonight's report and the data that was given to you is RTI intervention in specific writing programs. We have a lot of specialized reading programs for students, for the small group of students who need reading support outside. Most districts you will find, and we're included in this, need to look at specialized writing programs out of the general writing program for intervention. And that is a trend I think you do see on state assessments and on the Regents exam, writing about reading and writing about understanding. It's an area of need for some students. Student growth over time in proficiency and mastery is steady, and growth in program in each department, experiences in research, enrichment, and competition are innovative and engaging. But, and this is one thing I'm very proud of, the directors really expressed to me in preparing for tonight's presentation that they were so proud of the work, but each of them said to me separately they were also very focused on the work that they still needed to do. And so they were already talking about how preparing for this presentation helped them to craft and to clarify what they want to continue to work on and need to work on. I also want to take a moment because, you know, for the last several years we've had building-based meetings on achievement where the principals have gotten to speak. So as a former principal myself, I know it's hard to have that space taken away, so I want to thank them for the time and the space to allow us to do things a little differently this year, to take a K through 12 lens. But they're so valuable and their voice is so critical to the work that we do. We really do operate as a team. They're the instructional leaders of their buildings and essential to the creation, direction, and most importantly, the execution of any instructional priority, and how it interfaces with students. So again, even though they're not presenting this evening, I want to invite them to answer questions and for you to ask them questions directly as part of our team report. So thank you. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to the humanities team, who's going to give us a little overview, and then we're going to start the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So as you just heard from Dr. Zublionis, and in the report that you received this week, you've seen all of our standardized data and all of the quantitative data for all of our humanities. Next, we've put together a video that shows the process by which our students are able to achieve and attain the places that they get to. We'd like to take this video as an opportunity to look deeper into the classrooms, to go beyond the test scores and see what goes on. Similar to the tweet that we did last time, but this is a comprehensive video that we've put together. Thank you to Mr. Gordon, especially our editing pro. But in this journey to student success, we've identified collaboratively 4 values that are drivers in their achievement. These pivotal values are
choice. There are many paths to get to the destination.
Agency, students as drivers of their own education. Engagement, emotionally invested in appreciating the ride.
Perseverance, navigating the bumps in the road.
enjoy.
Because of the video and the sound, I'm not sure if you want to move it. would say the further you get away from the video, there are one or two small parts that will be tougher to hear. One of the challenges filmmaking, as I just started to learn, is that we record it on student devices, a variety of teachers as well as administrators. Some of the sound is a little bit quieter. We did our best to make sure we could come out here consistently as possible, but because we could spoke a little bit quieter over the device. There are one or two points that are just a little bit quieter, so if you want to come closer, we want to offer that as an opportunity. This is, that's on, this speaker's on, I can turn this on.
It's just, right, so I was just wondering where the sound was coming from, how we can, if bring in the microphone.
Try it. Seems. Start the other kid.
In the student journey to success, how we get there matters. Sets most of our students apart. Choice becomes a powerful tool that we use to help students really dive into learning. According to author Mike Anderson of Learning to Choose, Choosing to Learn, students learn more when they're motivated. I know this isn't exactly an earth-shaking statement. We all know from experience that when students have the energy and passion for their work, they are driven to excel and they can accomplish incredible feats. When we give choice, we empower our students and help them to develop and take more responsibility for their own learning.
My children chose the tree because we thought that some of them have read it before, and they thought it was really such a great book, such a sweet story. I myself have never read it, and I think we really love it because it has such a way of really connecting with you. Really, I was born with Connor. Connor is out of order, and I chose to read it because I like the characters and the author has really funny stuff and they're really good books, and I've read a lot of them. Hi, it's Juliana. I'd like to give a shout out on a book I recently read, which was called It's Not the End of the World, written by Judy Blume. The main character, Karen, has more than one character trait. As you can see, this little sketch I drew of her. And she has a lot of character traits. Like, for example, some likable traits she has are responsible, independent, mature, curious, intelligent, and loves her family. And some less likable traits about her is she's overly concerned, she's kind of grumpy, sometimes uncooperative, serious, selfish, and fearful.
Cool. So tell me about protection in the story.
So in my story, I'm gonna make like this tail on the first page, dragging into a T-Rex. And then this, I'm gonna make like an Allosaurus, so I do it on inversion speed. And I'm gonna make like a raptor tapping his head and screams it's going to get it down. Okay.
Key here is giving students choice and how they're going to reach these standards. It can be done in many ways. We can do it through test prep, but here, by empowering students to find things that they're interested to reach some of their creative work, they're becoming more empowered as learners.
Hello everybody, My name is Parker. Welcome to my National History Day vlog. I chose Central Part 5 court case for my topic. Ever since learning about the topic through my Netflix documentary When You See Us, I've been very passionate and interested in the project. I'm glad I was able to choose any topic with my choice because knowing myself, if I didn't enjoy it, I wouldn't have worked well.
In History Day, students have a variety of choices to make. One is in the topic that they will select. The images you see here represent some of the over 90 topics that students selected. They also have choice in the type of project they will create, whether they want it to be an exhibit, board, or they want to make a documentary, a website, a performance, or even write a historical paper.
I felt very good that we were able to choose our own topics and like we could control our curriculum for a few months, and I think it's very beneficial because that's where students learn much better when they can choose what they want.
In world language, when students choose a language of study, they have the opportunity to connect with cultures through new perspectives. Here, you can see excerpts from an English language and literature portfolio. Students use this space to collect evidence of their analysis of permanent literary works and their interpretations of controversial global issues.
Note-taking methods they find helpful. Students also advocate for topics which they believe.
This one was a look through from the first like I was looking at the text and I was looking at the very beginning and I was gonna go like read the form and go find the part that really needed to know what really major notes I thought. I came up with one solution that we should have tryouts for certain teams, and there shouldn't be separate weeks for one team, and they should be together.
In grade 4, students learn about major changes in history and advocate for a change that will increase equity and outcomes.
The candidate statements are organized according to the interpretive, interpersonal, and presentational modes of communication as described in the World Readiness Standards for Learning Languages. Students develop their proficiency from novice to advanced through the use of communication skills such as asking and responding to questions, expressing preferences and opinions, and maintaining a conversation.
The can-do statements help me understand the French language much better, and it allows me to set goals for myself. A few examples of this is in class when we present something, I have very few words in the slide, and when I see pictures and some of the keywords, I'm able to elaborate on my thoughts, and if I'm not understanding a word,
guide language learners to identify and set individual learning goals. Through personal reflection, our students are able to understand their progress toward language and intercultural proficiency.
Collaboration is another vital element of agency. Nordstrom Middle School nurtures student-driven instruction by facilitating peer-to-peer activities, having the students reflect upon their behaviors during these activities, and co-constructing an action plan for improvement. The Spiderweb discussion map contains a visual representation tracking the students' contributions during a class discussion. Teachers use the illustration to help students evaluate their communication skills and set goals to advance those skills. Strategies such as these discussion prompts provide students with ways to access the conversation more easily. Concentrating on peer interactions supports student agency by altering the hierarchical paradigm of education. Collaborative discussions, rather than teacher lectures, are the primary tools that students use to make.
So the question that the students are kicking around in the seminar really comes from Winston Churchill. Right after the Munich Pact was announced by Neville Chamberlain, Churchill took to the floor of the House of Commons and called it a, quote, total and unmitigated defeat, end quote, for Great Britain. We took that claim, turned it into a question, and asked the students to do the work that historians have to do, which is address an open-ended question, an interpretive question, a question that's not settled history, about which there's still debate. Gave them a passel of primary and secondary sources, and asked them to do the work of historians, sift the material, come up with a thesis, and then defend the thesis with evidence in support of it. We specifically asked students to look at 3 ideas that get kicked around as interchangeable, but which in fact are very different. How can the Munich Pact be understood in its context? To what extent can it be rationalized? To what extent can it be justified?
When asking the question, what is the Munich Pact justified?
And in his speech on the Jerusalem state, 1 pound was demanded at this point, 1 was given, 2 pounds was demanded at this point. Finally, the dictator consented to pay 170 pounds, with the rest of the property to goodwill. And what this quote means is that it's basically given an inch to the mile. When Hitler was given medieval Ireland to the occupiers of the environment, successfully pulled off Spanish conscience, and then finally he was given Sudetenland. It led him to a sense that he can do whatever he wants, that no one will stop him. And Eastman gave him that ability to feel that way, and that gave him the confidence to then later take over to Czechoslovakia.
Inspiring students through intrinsic motivation, rather than external rewards like grades or stickers, ensures that students will move beyond mere confinements. To stimulate students' emotional investment in their work, teachers illuminate the larger relevance of the work they do. Elevating classroom concepts to real-world socio-political outcomes arouses students' engagement with their work.
Every Spanish should be taught not only to be thinkers, but as well as communicators and risk-takers. The topics we study enable us to form an opinion about issues that matter and have relevancy to us inside and outside the classroom. With the subjects discussed, we are allowed to become global learners and connect with people outside the United States, and we take skills with us that we will carry throughout college and the rest of our lives.
Our students participate in a pen pal letter exchange program with the school in Columbia, sharing information about themselves using the target language while making connections with peers from another culture. Purposeful communication tasks mirror real-world uses of language. Students experience spontaneous and authentic conversations as they develop their ability to communicate with respect and cultural understanding.
When students find their passions, they dig into topics and classes in an engaging and meaningful way.
The power is so powerful, and it provokes discussion. Like at the end of class, I've never seen a class where the bell rings and the students are still sitting at the desk listening to what the guy has to say. Like I've had that multiple times where like someone's giving a presentation or we're having a conversation and the bell rings and it's like no, you don't even hear a single sound of like people like moving to leave, which is like so instinctual.
In the AP Government course, there is a final project that's an applied civics project where students research a current issue, either local, state, or on a federal level, propose a policy solution to the issue, and inform citizens of their avenues of influence on the issue. As students do this work, they have a variety of choices they can make to help make it more engaging for them. They can decide on an issue paper. They can do a documentary based on the issues. They can create a Google slideshow or a video slideshow to help them really present this information. Teachers really work to engage students by asking a variety of questions that really get to see what is the format that would be the best for them and what is the way that they can best reach their target audience.
North Shore students set goals for their learning and persist until they reach them. Rubrics, progressions, and anchor charts all help students measure their progress.
We're working on today how fluent we can read, and we have a chart and right here, and we have to, this is how we help ourselves read, like we give ourselves feedback and see if we're
what did you do to make yourself better for today?
I read my word song. I read my words in a snap, and I scoop my words and phrases smoothly. Yeah, because there's like a lot of other stuff that is like short term, like deadlines that seem like more important pieces that like you need to get done.
To create a perseverance-friendly environment, teachers embrace a growth mindset, the belief that ability grows with persistence and effort. Project-based learning, such as the 7th grade ELA book trailers, facilitates that effort by inviting students to demonstrate their understanding of author's craft by designing and creating a 2-minute promotional video endorsing their selected independent reading book. To facilitate students' perseverance, teachers foster an atmosphere in which risk-taking is supported and celebrated. When teachers model their own struggle and describe challenges as opportunities to strive, they support their students with a living example of the joy of lifelong learning.
And number 3, I think the technology. Because considering how much they use technology, we thought that would be kind of an engaging point also. And the really incredible thing was, I mean, we're kind of limited in terms of how much technology we know how to use to do this. And in a lot of ways, we were learning alongside with them, because a lot of students would come to us and say, like, I don't know how to do, I want to do this, but I don't know what I can use to do it. So we would say, all right, let's get onto a computer together, and let's do some Googling, and let's find if there are apps.
When I first heard about the assignment, I didn't think that I was going to do very well with it, because I don't know, I'm not very good with like computers and stuff. I just didn't think it was gonna like come out as good as I wanted it to. Like I had a vision in my head, and I feel like I was like afraid that it wasn't gonna come out. But it actually, I enjoyed doing it, and I kind of learned that I kept going with it, like I stuck with it, and then I'm proud of like what came out of it.
We continue to work toward increased student mastery and greater realization of these aspirational goals of choice, agency, engagement, and perseverance. And at this point, we welcome your questions about the report.
Thank you. Thank you, first and foremost, just for all the time and effort that obviously went into that. It's so incredibly helpful for us not only to have the reams of statistics and numbers that we have in our backup, but to really get that much of a look inside so many classrooms at so many age levels and to really see what's happening in our schools every day. Thank you for that. And to be able to hear that many students was very powerful. And with that, trustees, questions or comments? Tim, do you want to?
Thank you very much. I just had some questions regarding social studies. Is this on?
I feel like my voice was
Yeah,
disappearing too, but
okay.
they are on.
Yeah, just a few questions. One regarding the 8th grade and the National History Day. And I'm just wondering if you've gotten any feedback from teachers or parents regarding the amount of time that's devoted in the first 3 months to that. And I guess, yeah, if you've had feedback on that and whether it's too much time or, yeah, if you could comment on that.
One of the things that we,
Excuse me, Seth, could you use the microphone because the tape can't pick up your response, so anyone who's watching the video won't hear it. Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Thank you.
Yes, we did. I can just give you a story that briefly happened to me yesterday, too, to kind of help capture the first part of my answer to the question. I had a parent, I said, oh, I saw your son, we were using this film for the foreign language part, and we were talking, and she said, my son, really loved the History Day, and not only, was this time valuable for us, we went to Ireland, and my son decided to use a project about a family member, and they were able to kind of connect with family back in Ireland, and were able to kind of learn about some of their family history. So for that student, not only was the classroom time valuable, but it was a way to kind of connect with their families. So one of the parts of it is I find in my comments and talking with teachers as well as parents that have emailed me is that they're finding connections to history, from local history to history of their own families that they're able to connect to, and students will dive in beyond the classroom. We've also heard concerns, our questions really kind of about, how do you use the curriculum time to do all the 8th grade material too. This year we shortened the project by about 3 to 4 weeks. So as one way to say, how can we do this in the most efficient way possible? But we use our examples from the curriculum as our anchors. So we use stuff on Reconstruction and other things to use the 8th grade curriculum time for that. Also, students choose topics within the U.S. history frame. So even though they're using topics that are their choice, they're choosing topics within the curriculum. So they do a research where they do before and after. So when you're studying, John Brown, or you're studying another person and you're learning about the history of slavery, and then you're learning about civil rights as part of that project time, when you get to that course material, you have that kind of that leg up as that in-class expert. So it really becomes a way where you're kind of tapping into the full context of history as well as into that, parent time. But, I think we always are monitoring that idea of, what is the value of this time? And one of it is really the love of history and really the time to research. One of the things that we had looked at is how can we better prepare kids for the highest levels of writing and research that they're going to do in high school and as they move into college. In History Day, we came an opportunity for us to do, give kids, all 8th grade students, the ability to use Noodle Tools, which is a common research platform here in the high school, where they're going to do their extended essay work, they're going to do IAs, they're going to use a lot of this as an important research tool. So it allowed us in middle school to really start with the ability to
help them grow as researchers, as learners, as thinkers. And teachers have said, well, we still find ways to do the 8th grade curriculum time because it is one of the shorter parts of the history which is covered. So, and we've tried to balance using some of the 7th grade time to do some of the other parts of it as well. We're looking to put Reconstruction a little bit more into the 7th grade because that could be a natural endpoint to kind of help with that time as well.
Yeah, I was going to say that because I know starting the 8th grade curriculum with Reconstruction is a little bit early also compared to I know what a lot of other districts are doing, and usually some even get through the Gilded Age by that point, and they're doing the 20th century in 8th grade.
Yeah, so that's one of the changes that the teachers have given me feedback on. So this coming the next group of kids we won't be doing the Reconstruction. We'll do that as part of the 7th grade material and a little bit further. So we're going to see how far we can go just to kind of help bridge some of that time so we can spend a little bit more time digging into the things in the 8th grade that we'd like to.
Okay. Just one other question concerning the transition to the new U.S. History Regents exam. And I was just wondering what the your department's plans were when you were going to start administering the new exam.
So we begin the global Regents this year, so the new global, and not this year, but the year after, we'll start the U.S. Regents. So that way it's the same cohort of kids with the same type of questions. Having that practice from 9th grade to 11th, we think really kind of helping set that cohort up for success. Because the challenge with the state is not really releasing much in terms of prototypes for the U.S. history. And even when I met with Dan King to kind of ask questions about it, the state hasn't really put forward the representative that's on the U.S. part. They put forward the state representative that's on the global, so we can't answer a lot of the questions. So we've decided to delay that implementation and keep it with the same cohort. But my teachers last year, we already began revising curriculum and assessments for the U.S. in the previous summer, and we're expected to continue to do that in this summer, so that way the midterm and all those other work will be aligned towards the new U.S. assessment starting next year.
Okay, thank you very much.
Welcome.
I'll look this way. Do you have anything?
First of all, just to echo, thank you. This is a very comprehensive report. It's very data-driven. I was looking at all the data. Is this on? Can you hear me? And certainly our scores are really strong. I guess one of my thoughts was, as we do better on these standardized tests and as we do better comparatively to the other districts, are we losing some of that process you talked about? So it was encouraging to hear you talk about, and also encouraging to see the video and see the students. I wouldn't say you want to back into success on the score, on the standardized testing, but you want to see that as a byproduct of the authentic learning that we're really setting as the tone here. So the video was a really nice counterpoint to what we got from the data, so I appreciate that. Couple things in the data that I just had a question about. At the early ages, I'd never seen this data breakout before. On gender, on ELAs 3, 4, 5, the girls are doing better than the boys pretty much on proficiency and mastery. That's just age typical, or?
How smart are they?
They seem to even out a little bit later, so.
I'd look at some national norming on that. I can do that, and also look at, we do have the fall star data now, which we can now start to supplement that state data because we have students opt out. So I can compare those trends also for the other subgroups too, to see if the patterns are matching. Sometimes the small participation numbers on state tests can throw off percentages.
Well, it's encouraging also, our participation rates are growing on the ELAs, encouraging from a data perspective, not from a larger context of what's right or wrong on taking those tests. But in terms of data collection, we can see a lot more of the picture. And I also thought it was helpful to show that, as we studied in the past, the opt-out rates are across the board, as we've seen. So it's not just any one segment that's opting out per se, but it's representative of the whole. So what we're getting is, from percentages, are what we're getting. I appreciate the comments about mastery versus proficiency, and that obviously proficiency is really at the highest level, and mastery is strong, but certainly has some room to go. So I appreciate that also. I don't know necessarily what the direction you're going in that, but I know that certainly more data is your answer for that for now, and certainly that's what we want to see driving it.
I do believe, to your earlier point, that the process skills, the SVO skills that we're continuing to work on, and what we focused on here in this presentation, that will actually increase mastery. It's kind of an ironic side effect. When you focus on those process skills, then you're able to better handle novel problems in math and in STEM and science, but also in the humanities as well. Being able to synthesize, think at a higher level. That then I think does show up as higher mastery rates on standardized tests.
That'll be encouraging to see, because I think there is sort of a curiosity about that, sort of a hedgehog fox. Are we getting to a point where learning those skills implicitly from the type of learning that we're promoting gets you to a point maybe can't get all the way to that mastery level? So I'm hoping that it does, and that we see that continue. The only final thing I wanted to say was just on the other end, our IB scores are growing, are improving kind of across the board in most cases. The AP scores, not as much. So I do, they're sort of hovering, but I still wonder about the model that we're doing. And I'm also wondering, kids are still taking those AP tests primarily for the potential to gain college credit, or because they've done that and they kind of want to be there, or what's driving those kids to take those tests when they're in the IB co-seated classes?
I would say that the number one question that I get about AP and IB is about credits.
Okay.
That's by far the most popular question that I get. But I really think it's important that we try to change the narrative on that nationally, because it really is subjective to a university's decision, and it's more important that our kids focus on the value of what they're getting in the classroom and college preparation. What we're finding is that kids that are participating in these rigorous classes are getting credits, but it might not really push them forward to graduate in less than 4 years. We're still seeing that kids are still taking 4 years to graduate. What they have opportunities to, though, or the window is open for them to double major, study abroad, internships, minors. So that's like kind of where the credits really give them a leg up, or like maybe picking their scheduling, picking their classes sooner, things like that. The data is showing, though, that the kids that are challenging the IB diploma are graduating on time, and they are college and career ready. The data shows that they're prepared for the expectations of writing, research, and that they really are able to jump into the life of a college student without having that adjustment. So I back to your original question, though, about like the model working. I think that we are a reflective organization. I think that we're a reflective school, and we really try to work as a team to make sure that we're providing the best opportunities for our kids across the board. For a small school, it is really amazing the number of opportunities that we offer our kids in the humanities and STEM, and trying to do that wholeheartedly and with fidelity to both programs is challenging for us, but we really are working hard to deliver curriculum, instruction, and learning and assessment that addresses both, because we have a desire for both.
So I have a follow-up question to
please.
you, John.
Yes, sir.
So how, because I always ask questions about what information we get from graduates, and I'm told that it's hard to get the information from graduates. So how do you know that they're better ready through IB than through AP? I mean, that was kind of a bold statement to make, so.
So I went to a conference over the summer, and there were multiple university admissions deans sitting on the panels in some of the conference sessions that I went to. And the reason that I can say that is because IB diploma graduates are traceable. They're trackable in terms of their data. It's much easier to follow the line, the through line of a student in college, knowing that they were a diploma candidate. To say that you could follow a student that's taken one AP course, 2 AP courses, but this is a group of students going into the college life that have experienced research, they've experienced academic writing across subject areas, and they're quantifiable.
I just think that is, if you can't track the AP students, you have no way of doing that. And I would say that it would be based upon subject matter as to whether they're more prepared or less prepared, and students that are smart are students that are smart. But going back to the IB, so One of the questions that is always asked is, there was, in the beginning when we were sending teachers out to be trained, they were going all over Florida, California, Toms River. They were missing school. And I know recently, people sort of think that the training is over. Recently, I guess there were at least 2, maybe more, down in Florida for training. How frequently do we send teachers out for IB training, and how many days do they miss of classroom instruction?
So all of the IB courses are on a 7-year cycle of revisions. And that cycle takes in qualitative data from the university perspective to ensure that the courses are addressing the needs of those kids when they get into those majors in universities. So every course is on a 7-year cycle. Sometimes they do get delayed to a further timeline, but overall that is the consistent number that I could say across the board. So in any given year, we have 2 or 3 courses that are going through updates, and we want our teachers to be in the know, they do go to higher category trainings. Like when we became an IB school, all of those teachers were going to category 1 trainings, which were the basics, which we're talking about what is the IB and what are the approaches to teaching and learning. And when they're going to category 2 trainings, which is for the most part what they're going to now, those are benchmarking, those are looking at student work, looking at the research that's gone into the new standards and practices that are within each course. So within this year, we did have teachers go to math training, because that will be a new course in September. We will have teachers going for music and theory of knowledge. In the recent past, we've had revisions in language A and language B, and so we've sent teachers, we do look to minimize, we do look to lower the cost and decrease the amount of time that they're out of the classroom, but we do send them on an annual basis.
So you would say on average maybe half a dozen teachers every year are out doing training, and do we have a number on what that cost us?
We've had, off the top of my head, I want to say 3 go to training at this point in the year. So some of them are 1 day, some of them are 2 days out of the classroom.
And we have to fly them and put them up in accommodations, right? When they're out of state, because a lot of this is out of state.
Often, yes. The ones that are in New York are only in March and July.
And we have 12 diploma graduates this year and 25 in the program for juniors.
But we have a lot of students that are engaging with IB across the board and not just diploma
Who
candidates.
could be an AP? If we offered the AP courses. We had a lot of students in AP before we had IB. It's a cost factor,
I would like to point out, though, we have also in the recent past been sending AP teachers as well for training, because there have been revisions in those courses as well.
To Florida? California?
Those are, no, they've gone more like local New Jersey and Long Island and Queens.
Yeah, big difference. Thank you.
I just want to follow up. I have a question too about the HL programs in the foreign languages. What are we looking at in terms of enrollment? Because in looking at the data, we have very few students taking the HL language exams. In fact, maybe I misread it, but it looked like it was 1 in each class. What are the enrollments in those classes like?
So our HL classes in English, history, physics, biology are only HL, but for world language, they are COSAT classes, so we have the standard level kids in the same classroom with the HL kids. So any student that's going for the IB diploma needs 3 HL classes, so all of our students that are going for the diploma take English and history because those meet the requirements for New York State and for the IB diploma. So then for their third HL, most of the students here choose science. However, if a student, for example, chose chemistry SL, then they would need that third HL somewhere else. And that's typically where we've seen our students challenge the HL exam in language B. I think we will see an increase in the numbers in the coming years, though, because students are more comfortable in that classroom to take the risk to challenge themselves in that. With my background in there, in language classroom, I think students feel, I think we're bridging that gap more to address students' choices, whether that be SL or HL. So the difference is that the HL requires a literature component, and so there is literature infused into the curriculum for both levels because it elevates the water for all ships. I would like to point out, like, I know that there were some students last year that took French HL, and those would have been students that either wanted to take a fourth higher level student to challenge the diploma, or had done chemistry and needed the fourth somewhere else. I'm sorry, in Italian and Spanish. But in another language, we had a student that was a transfer here from another school and still wanted to take the diploma. She had transferred here from another school. And the courses that she had taken in the other school were not the same as what we had here. And so to get that route there, we had to look around to see where we could be creative. And so she ended up in the HL of another language so that she could still go for the diploma.
Thank you.
So the SL, so you're saying in these languages, the SL and the HL kids are in the same classroom, they're just taking a different exam
Yes, they are.
at the end?
Mm-hmm.
That would be the same in AP. They would co-seat them in an AP class, so your Latin 5 would be co-seated with your AP Latin students when they did AP. The AP students would just have some independent work on their own in order to be prepared for the exam,
For
because
the
you wouldn't
exam?
have enough students
Right,
either
absolutely.
either in IB or AP to run the class if you didn't co-seat them. So that's not really anything new or peculiar to IB, I would think, from experience.
Yep, please.
Hi, thank you. That was very impressive. I'm going to speak to some of the data in the report, the follow-up report, and then I'm going to speak to something else. I was looking at the opt-out percentages and participation rates, and it was interesting. The middle school 7th and 8th grade is significant. I mean, it's 96 out of 199 for 7th grade and 94 out of 215. Is that concerning for you in terms of digesting the data? And I know we have some alternative assessments.
Yeah, I do think to Mr. Ludmar's point before, I've always looked at these opt-out rates by cohort, and so this is a cohort that
Historically is.
historically had a higher opt-out
Right.
rate, but nevertheless, we still have to look at the data. So we do have internal data that we're going to look at, but I do think the Renaissance STAR assessments really give us very specific data.
You're
that can
lucky
help
you're only
supplement
working
that.
with like 199 per.
That-
Think of bigger districts that, that must be it. I'm also interested in the reading benchmarks.
Yes.
And I really don't know what is a typical percentage for kids
Yeah.
not meet. Are these numbers, I understand that this is incoming fall, where I guess the initial assessments as they come in.
Right.
Where they're landing, the beginning of first grade and at the end. What is it that we're striving for? I mean, of course, we'd love to strive for every kid meeting benchmark, but we know that's not realistic.
Yeah, it's funny because we were just meeting today as an admin team to talk about the STAR assessments and what's our plan for communication and teacher training, everything. And I think growth is the overriding goal.
Yeah.
So not to get to zero, though, like you
Right.
said, that's ideal, but that students are moving.
Right. And they are, their benchmark rates actually do improve over the grade levels, so K through 5, which
Can
is
I
very
just
encouraging.
clarify, are the benchmarks based on the STAR or the benchmarks from the Fonteness and Pinella? What?
So the STAR assessment uses a Lexile level.
Mhm.
It is a different form of data, so you do have to kind of look at both. It's a different assessment.
So the benchmark is from?
The F&P assessments
from
that
the
are given by the
F&P? Okay,
teachers, yeah. And I can certainly, now that
I
we
was
have-
just curious what it was, but sorry, I didn't mean to.
No.
Yeah, it's another thing we talked about today. So it is slightly different data because it's a teacher administered test that's really at the heart of it is for instruction.
Mhm.
Teacher gives it to their own students, helps them to group and differentiate, whereas the STAR is more standardized.
Okay.
And we've been doing the FMP for years.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. Deborah, I don't know if you wanted to add anything onto the.
Our big goal in that, and you can see it happening
Mhm.
there, staff closure for each
Yep.
child. If you have a child who's, let's say, substantially behind, our goal is to help them close the gap more and more.
Mhm.
So if they're very far behind, you may not close the whole gap
Right.
in a year, but if they're making more progress and then, like, say, their rate of growth is higher than, like, the typical student's rate of growth, then we feel that they are on the track to, and that the interventions and supports we're giving them are being effective. Whereas by looking at the data for individual children, when we see a child whom that's not the case, we would say it's time to change the intervention.
Okay, thank you. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. And then, so I'm always concerned about mastery of our disabled students. And from grades, we're looking at grade 3 ELA, grade 4 ELA, and I'm always, I guess this includes kids that are not taking it, so it's hard to know. Well, you know, because the numbers are small, like if
The numbers are small.
the kids that are opting out, are they kids who have IEPs, 504 plans, or just typical or average?
We have a mix across.
It's a mix, right? So, you know, it's kind of all over the place where, you know, grade 3 last year, not one kid achieved mastery, but they're still young learners. Some of them may have just been identified. I mean, the situations are varied, I understand that. But then when they get to high school, their mastery really improves. So the work over time, their interventions over time seem to be effective, which makes me very happy to see a global history regents, disabled students where another, you know, they're not even hitting 20, you know, 30%. One year there was 40% mastery, 4th grade, excellent ELA, but now it's 50, 65, 44 global history regents, so they're applying their writing to this knowledge, and it's all over 40%, which makes my heart sing. And their proficiency is great as well. It's 89%, 83%, 90, over 90s in U.S. history and government. I mean, that's significant. And I don't know what the past data was. I'm sure I can dig it up. I'm sure I paid a lot of attention to it, but this is very nice.
I can certainly get that.
Yeah.
Me too, yeah.
Thanks. Marian, do you want to speak to grammar and mechanics?
Listen, I've talked about grammar. I've even offered
I'll
to
leave
give
that
you my
alone.
retired nuns. I mean, I don't know much else I can do.
Now, and so it's so interesting, and again, I think our ELL population is probably very varied from year to year. The kids that come in and what skills they're coming in with. So I'm sure you're tracking the effectiveness of our ELL intervention. So the grade 3 ELA for ELL students, level 3, 100%. I mean, I think that's a great statistic. We should be very proud of that. And then in other years, it's level 2 and level 3. Grade 4 last year, 66%, 33, 2 and 3. And then level 2 for grade 5. So you've probably already identified those as areas of focus, I would say. Now, so we had the roundtable, the graduate roundtable. I'm so interested to understand I don't know how many of you attended the roundtables yesterday in the afternoon and the evening. We're always talking about some, you know, feedback from the students. What feedback have you received from the students about their preparation for college? We had a new batch that graduated. What did they bring back to you in terms of, this is what North Shore, you know, was so great for me, and I went to ABC College and I did really well, really helped me. And this is kind of, or another spot, like I really wasn't ready for this. Outside of maybe the skills of daily living. Let's just pull that out. Let's just pull that out, because my son, I don't think, did his laundry once.
And Mr. Cousins?
They wouldn't tell me what they said, so I'm asking you.
One of the prevailing ideas out there is that high school is way more difficult than college in a lot of ways, primarily how we use time and how they have a lack of free time. One of the things is negotiating or navigating how to manage that time that you're expected to do things when you're not being prescribed. From the academic perspective, they feel very well prepared. In a lot of ways, it's easy. They feel that they've engaged with many of the texts that they're expected to do. With many, even some of the papers that they reference back to that they did in high school, they're able to use. And many of them reference the amount, actually, the amount of credits and how they're able to have either a second minor or to do things that they wouldn't normally be able to do. But the preparation thing was definitely very high academically. I think the social preparation is an opportunity for growth, and how to access help and resources when given time would be, I think, another theme emerging through that. And just the idea of homesickness and those things that I think for our more general youth, and how to navigate
the two visits, really, I think they missed the dog more than mom and dad. And I completely understand that, because I miss the dog if she's gone for a day at the vet. But thank you. Thank you for preparing at least my children. I don't like to make it about my kids, but thank you for inviting them to come speak to their friends in the lower grades. I think they were very well prepared. Keep doing that. Keep inviting them. I think it gave them the opportunity to reflect and be able to share their experiences, both good and bad, in their first semester in college.
I am interested when we get to see the STAR data, particularly since on the math side, we've actually have data going back a number of years on the elementary end. So
Right, yeah, there's a cohort that's had it now for a few years, yeah.
I think that'll be interesting, and I think, I could be wrong, I think there's a sense in with your STAR data, you can see both ends of achievement probably a little better, whereas with the ELAs, a 4 is a 4, it's proficient, it's not, Whereas with the adaptive test, you might be able to give us more of a sense of a better range, am I?
Yes, in fact, just in working with the trainers from Renaissance, there are folks that specialize in the use of this for acceleration, for meeting the needs of students who are, beyond grade level ready for certain sub-skills. The tools, and we did another training right before the winter break, the specificity of how they can diagnose certain mastery in certain sub-skills, it's just so specific that it really gives a
That
very
makes
detailed
sense.
picture. But yeah, I think along the continuum is a broader continuum as well. So you see a fuller picture than just 1, 2, 3, or 4.
I'm looking forward to that.
I think it's also more meaningful because when you try and compare us in our cohort stuff, looking at, the ELA, and you're looking at proficiency, and you're looking at different districts, all those districts have a different demographic population. So maybe
Well,
there are
plus they
districts that
change it every
have,
year.
that English, maybe there are a lot more students where English isn't their first language, even in a very high achieving district.
Sure.
So I think it's hard to say whether we're successful when we're comparing to another district, but to see the achievement within our own students, the growth within our own students, I think is more meaningful than comparing us to Jericho or Great Neck or Locust Valley. I mean, just taking names out of a hat, right?
Yeah.
I was going to say, there's been a growing consensus in the teachers and the administrators here to look for that type of data. Like, how do we compare to North Shore? How do we compare to the past year? How are students themselves growing? Just giving a workshop on growth mindset over the summer, and a couple teachers started talking about that and really making a very similar point about, well, if we really believe in growth mindset, then why are we looking at comparative data? Why aren't we having students even look at their own data and look at how they're growing, and teachers certainly as well?
Yeah. I was going to say that, I think we saw tremendous evidence of our emphasis on, this continuous improvement process, of evidence that we're constantly looking at what level of rigor we're presenting kids with, and that we're tremendously reflective on what we're doing and what we can do better. And those things are essential, right? You couldn't ask for more than that. And in some of the backup material, when we're talking about, so we have a long list of things that we would like to do moving forward that we think are going to make our programs even better, which is important in exactly what we want to do. Although I do want to say that even at the board level, we hear very consistently from students that there are certainly at least some years, junior year being our favorite example, in which the students are very clear that they have too much to do already. And so I think we have to take that into account too. Like, no matter how fantastic the ideas are, we've already hit for a lot of kids an upper limit on how much work can get done. And so that was actually very heartening about the 8th grade history day example, is that, we found the opening where something really could fit in and something could be shifted, instead of just more. So yeah, let's not Don't kill anybody off. Anybody else? Then we have nothing but, you know, our final heartfelt thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good work.
I would, but we have a trustee that. Are you sure? We could be here a long time. Okay. All right. Make it.
I make a motion to move public comment up before the discussion about the budget.
Discussion? All in favor? Okay. We will now have, I don't know if anyone will have a question
Questions
that's
for the
relevant.
administrators, that was my thought.
Okay.
But, you
See
know,
what happens.
I too am anxious to, you know.
I would like to release that.
We would like, yes. This is, yes, part of our effort, although who's not interested in the budget?
There's a second public comment though, so.
There's a second public comment that people ask about the budget that our administrators are being clear about.
They might be interested.
Okay, so do we have
Okay.
anybody? From
We are now going to open the floor for public comment. Anyone who wishes to participate, we're going to ask that you come to the microphone. We need your name and your town of residence. The trustees are happy to hear your comments. The floor is open.
Maria Mosca, what else do you need to know? Daughter in Seacliff School? What did you say, Sarah?
Town of residence, but
Town
we're
of
going to go with
residence,
Seacliff. We're going
Seacliff.
to.
I just didn't want to break my streak of saying something during public comment every time I come. Just kidding.
There's no trophy.
Actually, every time I'm here, which is not often enough, I realize how important it is for parents to be here. I think I might be the only non-administrative parent in the room. I'm sorry, forgive me. Good to see you, thank you. So I just a couple of things. Wanted to make one comment on this amazing presentation. Deborah, thank you for calling me to let me know. I used it as an excuse to get myself here. Every time you guys are meeting, I tell myself to come, and I don't come. Deborah called me and told me my daughter would be on a clip, and I thought, I've got to go see her. So it was very nice, but also wonderful to see this incredible work that's being done. The part about student choice struck me because my daughter's in 4th grade. They're doing studying the American Revolution now. My husband happens to have a master's in history, has always loved history. And we talk about history a lot. And last September, we went to the Culper Spy Day in Huntington. And it was wonderful. We got there too late, but we managed to catch, the last presentation at the university. We got to see the letters that they have in their manuscript library from George Washington, and my 4th grader was enamored of this. So here they are now in school studying it, and she came home the other day very, very excited because she had the choice of what to write about, and she's going to write about Culper Spy Day, or the Culper Spy Ring. And she was, and she's a kid who doesn't need a lot of motivation, but this was clearly motivating her to another level, and it was extremely heartwarming for us. So, to the extent that parents can hear about this in other ways, and I know this should, we should be here to hear about these things, but those of us who really want to encourage and support your work at home, it would be lovely for us to have other ways into what's going on. So I just want to say that thank you, thank you, thank you, and some of us are really open to more involvement. There was one other comment I wanted to make. Oh, it was just a small thing. I am a parent, so my daughter was in 3rd grade for the first time having the situation of her taking the state exams, which I had been hearing about for a long time. I had been agonizing over how we were going to make this decision because, you know, my parent cohort, there were a fair number of people advocating opting out. We didn't go into it assuming that we would opt out, and in fact really, really struggled with the decision. And when I heard about is it the 7th or 8th grade classes that were, I guess, at the beginning of the opt-out movement, that I didn't realize in the history of this district how high that was, and I'm sure it's lower now. But I also wonder how much we're now looking at why parents are still opting out. My husband and I, well, actually, I and my husband went along with it, did ultimately opt my daughter out of the ELA, but had her take the math. It was a complicated decision, and I won't waste your time today about why we did one and not the other. But the bottom line reason we opted out had much more to do with privacy concerns and the fact that the exam is administered on computers and the control that the corporations who are doing the testing have over it, rather than schools and ultimately, you know, the people who I think should have that control. I have a bit of a background in education myself at a different level, and I'm very aware of the privacy issues. Generally, I go through my life knowing that we've already thrown away all of our privacy, but I'm still in that moment where I'd like to, you know, protect my child's privacy as much as possible. So for what it's worth, this year, knowing whether the exams will be administered on computers ahead of time would help me to make that decision, and it's just one that I'd, you know, welcome more discussion about. So thank you for your time. Oh, yes.
I can
Peter,
tell you,
challenge me?
well, not challenge you, but
yeah,
we
educate me.
we don't administer the computer-based testing at all in any area. We always have paper-based tests.
Right. Which I also know doesn't necessarily mean that it won't be available digitally. It will be digitized at some point.
Correct, but we always opt
right.
for the paper-based test
Right.
versus the computer-based
Okay,
test.
and that there's no plans to change that at this
Not at
point.
all.
Well, that's very helpful. Thank
Yeah,
you.
you're welcome.
All right, thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time.
Do we have anyone else for public comment?
It's a couple of students in the back.
I don't have the microphone. I'm gonna have to get.
Piara Kask, Sea Club. Well, Happy New Year, first of all. I think this is my first time bringing any concerns during the meeting. I'm sure all of you know both of my sons were very involved and still involved in music, and my younger son is a junior who is involved in music in school and outside the school. And my concerns are related to music in our district. So Richie plays 2 instruments. He plays saxophone, which was his primary instrument, and bassoon now. Through his involvement in music, I learned the requirements and the difference in requirements between the band, orchestra, and chorus, all of which receive the same credit. Nonetheless, band requires a lot of outside the classroom involvement. So my older son, who was taking a lot of high study courses, struggled with that because having a lot of work. He had to participate in being a band player. He had to participate in football games, which he found very difficult at that time. And Richie as well, he just did not sign up for pep band, or did not sign up for the extracurricular activities. He's taking a band, and I'm curious, how can we mandate any student taking orchestra or playing for orchestra, band, or chorus to participate outside the classroom in those activities, who very often marching in a parade falls on a holiday and it's a family time. Sometimes, depends of the year how successful our athletes are, but sometimes we have many football games, and we expect them, our musicians to be there. And if they're not there, they're being penalized for the absence. And I don't think that's fair, because I don't think all of them are so passionate and involved in music that they are willing to take it to the next level. The other thing is between band and orchestra, there's a huge discrepancy between the what involvement, what is the amount of involvement outside the classroom. They receive the same credit, but my son suggests that he's going to switch to orchestra because it's much less of the time after, after class. I would like to someone to help me understand how can we make students participate in all those activities when they only sign up for the in-classroom course and none of the other classes practice such a approach. My next concern is students. It's about actually about band parade. Students who march in a parade are required to purchase polo shirt. I believe it's $20. It's really not about the money, but about the principle. No other student in the whole district is required to purchase uniform, athlete uniform, or any other clothes that we have to pay for. Nevertheless, our marching band has to pay for that. I think that's something that perhaps could be addressed with your help. Another thing that I would like to bring up is the fact that we have a lot of very talented and accomplished musicians, and I think we should be proud, and I think we should also be very sensitive to make all of our students be proud of their work and feature all of them in a concert, because I think it creates a sense of favoritism if we only pay attention to certain musicians, as we have, I think, 7 of them who made the All-State. And I know we had some issues which, with the help of administration, had been addressed, and I thank you for that. Another thing that I would like to bring it up, it's the pertains to the instrument. I noticed a large amount of money that are being spent for the repair of the instruments. And I know, as a mother of 2 musicians, that our instruments are very expensive and the repair is very expensive, and I get that. Nonetheless, I know that at this point, the quality and the condition of our instruments are required some really, approach to make that better. We purchased one instrument for my son. The other one, we actually had to go outside the school and rent to bring it to school so he can have an instrument that actually can play. So the reason that I'm bringing this up is because I know it costs a lot of money. Maybe at some point we can think about, look at if it's worth fixing that. Because like I said, we basically rent and purchase 2 different instruments because it's not, it's a very, very poor condition. I don't know how long it has been since we purchased any instruments, or did we look into that, or maybe it's maybe that's an idea that I just want to bring it up to you. Another thing is my experience with I'm sure you all love, but my son was very involved in jazz, and they used to have I don't remember how it was called, a jazz combo. And I think the kids loved it. It was very competitive ensemble, and the community appreciated it. And for for our school, who is recognized with the music accomplishments, it's sad to see that go. I know the kids are very interested to continue playing. I know they were told by the band director that he's no longer available, and I'm wondering why is that, because I know there is interest. So maybe we can look into that, since we have students who are interested in continuing that. And last but not least, I have one last concern. I'm very grateful for the opportunity for our students to go on the wonderful trips. Nevertheless, the opportunity is only opportunity if we can take advantage of the opportunity. And if we cannot afford financially, that is not an opportunity. So my concern is that the cost of the trips are just are skyrocket, and it gets more and more expensive. And I feel that a lot of deserving students who could greatly benefit from going abroad and maybe taking this music leadership to the next level simply cannot afford that. So I was hoping that perhaps in the future, the policies and contract could be revisited. And I'm hoping that we can all keep in mind, why are we doing this in the first place? Who do we want to benefit from this? I really would like to see a student who, more students who are not that privileged to be able to take this life-changing opportunity trip. I went to the last meeting. I arrived there late, so I didn't get a chance to listen to everyone. But what I heard, it's from the teachers, what a great experience they had, and that's wonderful. And I think we all would love students to be able to go on that trip. And unfortunately, I think the cost prevents a lot of them from going on the trip. So I really hope that you sincerely gonna address this in the future, so we can have our students all of them take that trip. So it's not only the same fortune ones. And because I think that goes back to our district goals and the strategic plan about equality for all students. And I think that will be very important. And I really believe that this will make a change. Thank you.
No, thank you. We really appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, there's a lot here, so I'll have to talk with Mr. Cousins tomorrow. I mean, if you have anything, Albert, you want to, yeah. So we can, yeah, because there's some things that I'm not 100% clear on how it all works, but okay, fair enough. Okay.
It is true, though, because I had a child in orchestra and a child in band, and because of pep band, we couldn't take driver's ed outside of the school because every Saturday was with the football games, and that is a fair comment about the band being required, having required appearances outside of the school day. That is not part of really the curriculum, and is not required of the other groups. There may be on occasion, where the orchestra plays somewhere, the chamber orchestra or the madrigals, but it's not the number of days that are required for pep band or the requirements for the orchestra to march. Until recently, it was only the band who played at graduation. Now was a symphonic orchestra played at graduation. Now they've changed it, but there are a lot of requirements for student and band that exceed, and the cost of the trips have gone up astronomically, as we've discussed in the past, and they are tremendous opportunities. And there used to be, back in the day when we booked the trips initially, a chance for students to raise money. There was a raffle for a weekend in Paris or some other location, and there were students who were able to pay for their trip by selling a sufficient number of raffle tickets. And that sort of changed with Cuba because of the way we had to book Cuba, and I don't know what they're doing these days. So there's a lot to unpack, but I think there are points that we could look at.
Hello. I'm Daniel Perez. I'm from Seacliff, and I'm the vice president of the high school ski club.
My name is Camille Giertel. I'm from Glenwood Landing, and I'm president of the North Shore High School Ski Club. And we'd like to address some concerns that I know we've recently spoken with Dr. Girizzo and Mr. Cousins. However, in regards to the cancellation of the overnight trip for the ski club, we know that there were some concerns with the trip being assumed to be cost prohibitive to students in the district. However, we were wondering why that change was made, not only just this year, however, why that would be why that was the only trip to get canceled. As I know previously were mentioned the high costs of the music trips, as well as I know some of the other trips that take place that are in the thousands of dollars in comparison to our ski club trip, which we do have a complete cost breakdown, which I can give all of you. But I just wanted to know if that was if the board was aware of that, and as well of our business plan to subsidize the cost for any students that would not be able to attend the trip otherwise if they wish to do so. As well as I know that there were concerns about inclusivity, not just in regards to the cost, but it is one of the few school opportunities that is open to every student in every grade level, also regardless of skiing and snowboarding ability.
And another concern is just that I think the overnight trip just in general is an important part of North Shore heritage, and it's been one of the longest running clubs that we have here. And it just seems kind of surprising that it was canceled so suddenly without any reason for, or sorry, any clear indication as to why. But yeah.
If you would like to,
I'm
you're
happy.
welcome to.
Sure.
I-
Okay. How are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm great. And I am Dr. Girizzo. Yes. Okay, so Mr. Cousins and I met with Daniel and Camille and Veronica Drescher and someone else.
Daniel Brooks.
Yes, we met a couple of weeks ago before the break. And we talked about the things that that you raised, and we looked at the cost of the trip and the accessibility and the affordability of that for lots of kids, and the fact that what makes this overnight trip a little bit different from the other trips is that it's a club-based overnight trip versus a trip that is supplemental to a class or a curriculum. So it makes that piece a little bit different for you than for the other clubs. So that was the reason why. That was the primary reason why. Mr. Cousins and I have spent a good portion of a year and a half or so talking about the trip. So I know it sort of feels very sudden to you, but we've been talking about this for a while. We also talked about there wasn't an event that happened that caused us to say that's it, no more overnight ski trips. It really was with the change of advisor and some reflection on what the goals of what we were looking to accomplish, that this was the right time for us to make the shift. And we talked about all this together. So, and I do appreciate you guys coming back and looking at how to subsidize that a little bit. It probably wasn't a lot of dollars, right, in the subsidy.
We had a business plan in place as to
Right.
either fundraise or subsidize the cost,
Okay.
as we mentioned. However, I was just wondering, as speaking to the argument of the trip being preventing certain students from going due to the missed opportunities through it being a school trip. However, through our calculations, we found that going on the trip through the school would be approximately half the cost of as if somebody was to take the same trip
Right.
themselves. The cost breakdown per person.
Right, right. That may be true. Right.
I also think it gives an opportunity to people who wouldn't normally have the opportunity to go skiing. Considering the drastic cut in costs with going with the school, some families who wouldn't be able to afford to go skiing with their children could send them through the school for a much cheaper cost.
And I don't think that it's the only trip or club with which there are costs associated, even with sports. I know my younger brother plays lacrosse. It is not a cheap sport by any means.
I know I have a lacrosse
and
player at
all
home.
of those, yeah, and all of those costs we cover, so if that would, I feel like the same reasons would prevent a child from being able to play a sport like that in comparison to going skiing.
Understood. Okay. So I hear you, right? And my recommendation remains that we stay with a day trip for this year. And I know that kind of stinks, and it's not what you want to hear. But that's where I am with this. For all the reasons that we talked about.
Thank you for your consideration.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else for public comment? Okay, we'll close public comment and we will move on to the budget discussion. You are welcome to stay and you're welcome to take this moment to slip out.
But before you guys, I'm sorry, before we break, I'm sorry.
I was going to let you go.
She was going to let you go. I just want to say to Daniel and Camille, right before you walk out the door, right? I want to thank you for the respectful way in which you've approached this, and the maturity that you've shown, and I really do appreciate your the way you've laid out the argument. I know we don't agree with how this is going to land, but I do. I'm very, very impressed with your approach, and we'll look forward to working with you on other kinds of things where hopefully the outcome will be different. Okay, but I want to thank you very much.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you guys for coming.
You're welcome. Okay, so
Budget time, the time I've waited for all
budget
night.
time. So before we get into a couple of things here, I did want to distribute a revised calendar. So it is in your Dropbox. I have hard copies. When we talked in November, at the first conversation that we had about the budget, we had talked about moving the fund balance discussion from later in February up to February 6th, and I had made that note in my notes, but I didn't make the change on the calendar.
Okay.
And so I made that. I know that was something the board wanted to a change the board wanted to make, and so I made that on a revised calendar. So we moved that fund balance discussion up from, I think it was originally February 23rd, up to February 6th. So I'll pass out a new calendar. You could take a look at it. If there are other adjustments that the board wants to make on this, we can take those notes. We can take those notes now, and then we can get into the drivers if you are so inclined. Yes. Sure. Uh-huh.
I got very interested in participating
I think it parallels my concern that we have so much on February 27th that I was concerned we would be here all night as it was, so.
We can be ready to have that discussion on February 6th, for sure.
Is that okay, Fairman? You're like, like, I'm here. Okay.
You're welcome.
None to me. Okay.
And some of these are much more substantial than others on February 27th, but easy to move
But-
that.
Right. Regular instruction and special ed, yeah, that's a lot.
If it helps, we could probably move technology up from the 27th to the 6th as well.
To some extent, and I can't tell necessarily from looking at this, I think we all benefit if like the number of lines or pages we need to consume for a particular meeting is relatively
Mhm.
even. Just, because we want to be prepared on the one end, so, if we had 1 inch each day instead of, 3 inches for
Right.
one meeting, and it literally is measured in inches. You've all seen these books. If tech moving something upside, and then the other part is where, in terms of the meeting itself, where the trustees' conversations tend to be
Yep.
longer, and that's really, the fund balance certainly is one, but other than that, we're talking about it usually appears right in instruction, special ed, library, technology. I'd be surprised if we didn't discuss guidance
Mhm.
because of the wellness issues.
So in terms of number of pages of lines, I just did a very quick calculation for you. So the narratives are different because the narratives are narrative. But there are about 36 pages of lines on February 6 without athletics. And it looks like it's about 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 21 or so with athletics there. 21, 22. So the number of lines that you're looking at, pages of lines on, for February 27 is a little bit less than what you're looking at on February 6, but the substance of the, this February 27 is really the meat and potatoes of
Right,
the
that's
academic
the whole-
program, right?
Revenue projections is one page that we can spend
But we could
some
talk
time
about
on.
it.
Right. And so even that can move up if you wanted to tie that to fund balance projections.
It'll focus on, I'm just saying that trustees we don't know, but it is possible that trustees will want to discuss that section because of those issues.
So there aren't specific, the specific discussion may not be around wellness and health, but the items within the budget that support those components of the program. Does that make sense? So it won't be a discussion on wellness as much as a discussion on the things that we'll budget for, that we're proposing to budget for to support. Number of
counselors.
Number of counselors.
Psychologists, social workers.
Yep, elementary health teacher, things of that nature. The program, right? So no, we are definitely looking at, unifying our approach to how we, so the social emotional oversight committee is looking at various programs. That's not going to come out that night, but the funding, the funding sources to do that work will be there. So you won't miss a core programmatic piece by not being there for that. And I could certainly have a conversation with you on the front end.
And we'll have the whole book ahead of time, right?
Yes,
So
you will.
even if you're not at the meeting, you'll
Yeah.
still be able to read the lines and send us whatever you want to say too.
Totally.
Any other, do you guys have any other thoughts about the calendar?
Speaking of the book, just roughly, when do you think, if you had to ballpark it?
Why not?
I've
feel-
got a terrible draft under my basement door. I was going to use it for that.
We usually, the book usually comes out when? I can't remember, Olivia. We're still working on it. Yeah, it's still assembling it. End of the month? Right? By the end of the month for sure. Yeah.
I was thinking there's a lot to discuss in the 6th, so,
That's up to you if you want us to read it. You'll have to,
We're running really pretty fast, so we'll see.
Before you could put it on my Kindle, that's what I really want to know.
can you not still, you still can't get like, you can get PDFs on Kindles.
It is scanned. It's always scanned. We'll
Hold on, I'm going to check right now. I'm going to check something.
all right. We'll work on it.
I'm working
I
on it
don't.
right
No
now.
promises about the Kindle, but we'll we'll do what we can do.
good.
We can definitely do PDFs. I'll try.
I really think I can. Like a Kindle or a Kindle app.
Okay.
I can do it.
Okay. So we're okay with the calendar.
I think we're
Are
good
we,
with the calendar.
are
We're
we
now
just
good with
moving the
calendar.
athletics, or are there? Did
I
you
think-
want to take anything else?
I think we're just moving. Right, that's,
They do seem to be connected.
Hi, I thought that was a good idea.
Okay.
And leave technology down there.
yeah.
Okay. So we're gonna. So I already moved the fund balance discussion, and I will move the athletics co-curricular narrative, the athletics co-curricular budget lines, and the revenue projections from February 27 over to February 26.
Right,
Okay.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Budget drivers?
Budget drivers. Okay, so we, when we talked back in November, we talked about what were the priorities, and the board was very clear with us about making sure that we support, the social emotional learning of kids, that we keep class sizes at reasonable sizes, that we, do what we can do to preserve the instructional program. And so we have been working on all of that. And when that all comes in, you could likely, and then we ask our administrators, what do you think advances the program in a meaningful way? And we get all of our budget requests. When we do the initial run of where we are, we end up looking at usually pretty big numbers, because it's a zero-based aspirational budget, and then we have to talk about what it is that we can afford. And so the major, in the current 1920 budget, our budget is $1,007,799, and so right now we are at 111 and a half. Is where we are, and we have some work to do in order to get that down. But the biggest, the drivers that we're working on right now are staffing requests that are coming in around. So we have, for example, the Glen Head 4th grade is likely going to require another section. going into the next year. Today we received another student, and those sections are knocking on 25 for grade 4. And so we are looking towards, we're looking at those sections. There really isn't an offset on the enrollment. I thought that perhaps because we added this section to first grade last year, and so it's in that weird spot. There are 45 kids in the cohort, so if currently it's in 3 sections and 3 15s, and if you make those 2, it starts to knock on 23, and so the offset there doesn't give you much wiggle room if you get new students over the summer.
And we,
And
our
and
grades generally increase in size up through 4th grade.
And they generally do. So so we're working through that. That's definitely a staffing scenario that's driving the budget. We are looking at a math support increase across the 3 elementary schools that would be shared to take some of the edge off of academic support that kids may need in math. The Mandarin program is growing both in size and in scope, and so because we're still adding
a grade.
Exactly.
Through the first year as well.
That's right. And so there's additional Mandarin support. We talked at the last report on student achievement about the Fine and Performing Arts program and the dance program that's up and running at the high school. We want to expand that both by way of elective at the high school and introduce it at the middle school. So there's some funding that we've set aside for that. We've set aside funding to try to manage the theater and acting class that we've been trying to get off the ground for several years. Additional reading support at the middle level that's needed. And so it's not a budget where we have a lot of staffing additions related to new program. It's building on what we have and making sure that the supports that we have for the academic supports are getting the job done of what we need to have done. We've also been expanding the ILC. And so that in special ed, so that that's been a driver. And when we look at what drives the budget numbers, we're looking at numbers in the hundreds of thousands, not the millions. So all of the regular teaching staffing, all of those new ads are right now is sitting at about $580,000.
What years are we going to be up to? You're talking about the co-taught model that we're doing at the elementary now, similar to what we do at the middle school and the high school.
That transition will complete itself next year into grade 5. So the last cohort of kids we have in the half-day ICT model is grades 4 and 5. So next year we plan to complete that expansion and have full-day ICT support in K through 6.
So let me ask about the Glen Head 4th grade.
Yes.
Is part of the reason why there is an increase in the population is because we're bringing kids whose home schools would have been a different home school to
No.
Glen Head because the composition of the class makes a difference.
Mm-hmm.
So there were years at Glen Head, one of my kids had it where they had, both my kids had it where they had 25 kids
Yeah.
in a classroom in the 4th and 5th grade, which is probably less problematic than having 25 kindergartners in a class, right? Because they're more
Totally.
independent. But it depends on what the population consists of. So if it was a special ed population, that maybe needed more teacher attention, maybe 25 would really be more difficult than,
Well, those classes have 2 teachers in them.
That's true,
right?
too.
So they're pretty well.
They're
you know,
staffed,
They're
they can
pretty.
handle
they're
that.
staffed pretty well, and we try to keep the ICT classes on the lower side, just as a general rule.
Well, right, that's what I'm saying.
But this has to do with the ILC.
ILC, okay.
This is
I'm
ILC.
sorry.
That's okay. No, this is at the middle school. So expanding some of the ILC classes at the middle level requires us to add some additional staffing. Another driver in the budget is looking at a new student management system. And so we have been using PowerSchool for, for quite a while, and at least as long as I've been here, there have been complaints about Rich is nodding his head, about the efficacy of it and how well it functions and how well it meets the needs and the scheduling and all of that. And so there has been a team that has been researching, different models of for student management systems, and as you could likely imagine, they are costly. And when you cut over from one to and there aren't many to choose from, and so when you cut over, you actually are paying for 2 student management systems at the same time because you have to.
You have to integrate the technology.
You have to integrate the technology. So that becomes a driver.
How much are we talking about?
About 190 grand, to make the transition. It's a big number.
So if you're talking about student management systems and scheduling and all of that, before we make the decision to change over to a different student management system, and I know it's not just, scheduling in terms of time, it's putting in grades, and there are a lot of different things.
Yep.
Are we going to make a decision about block scheduling or changing the way we manage the day at the high school? Because that may impact what system you take.
Yes.
So I think they kind of go hand in hand.
They do. They kind of, yes and no, Marianne. So the first answer to your question is yes. Albert and his and Jen and Kevin are working now with the teachers on evaluating a couple of options of different schedules, and then the plan is they will then have a meeting with Chris and I
And make a recommendation.
and then we'll bring that to you. Whether we have a block schedule or a modified block schedule or a traditional schedule, the student management system shouldn't play too much of a role in driving that because they all can manage
Whatever schedule you
whatever
adopt.
schedule
Okay.
we put in. So that's a good question. Okay. And then we have, teacher retirement system contributions and, health insurance, contributions, which are down in the short term, but the way we have to budget for our retirement, our health insurance payments is really complicated because it runs, our calendar is a fiscal calendar and the health insurance calendar is a annual. And so we get the rate from January to January, and then we have to forecast out from, the following year. So we have to build in some contingency for it, even though right now it's like very incrementally down. In a year, that may look very different. And so we have to budget for that contingency. Okay, is that all making sense?
Same as it is every year.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah, so the drivers of where we are in all of this are roughly $2.8 million of expenses are really driving the next steps in where we currently are. Okay, so any questions or comments or direction setting points that the board would like us to work through?
How much more is the TRS contribution this year? It went from 8.86 to, they give you a range. They don't give you the definite number until close to next year. And it's 9.25 to 10.25. That's the the rate they're giving us. So you have to, we typically pick the middle.
Is that because of what happened in December affected the actuarial valuation? Because overall, the stock market
Is up.
had been up for the year. It was just December took away all the savings for 2019.
Yeah, I think, you know, they use the 5-year average, and this is the end of the 5 years. So they have to be looking at the next 5 years. So
Because
I
it's
think they are
because it's
hedging
an average
their-
rate of return
Yeah,
over
I
a
think they're
20-year
hedging their
period. Yeah.
bets too as we go forward
do the
the next
valuation.
couple of years. So sometimes, I mean, TRS is quite well funded, but they have to always think down the road what's going to happen in the market, because they don't want to jump significantly in 1 year. That affects school district because of the cap at the back.
But they don't give you a break for the fact that it was better than their estimates.
No, because it's an average.
million
it's
percent no.
when you do the actuarial evaluation, it's a presumed average rate of return. So when they do the valuation, every fund adopts their own average rate of return, and they're generally between 6 and 7.5%, depending on how aggressive they want to be. And it's also based upon the age of the participants. So as you have an aging population with less actives, when you have a shrinking, you know, in some instances, a shrinking school population, that goes into it. So the numbers, it's not just the stock market. And so what they're trying to achieve, so 1 year you may achieve 13%, but another year you may only achieve 3%. And they have to make it so that the presumed rate of return is met.
Over the next couple of years.
Right, over the next, yeah.
Okay, and then so for, that's on the expense side of things, on the revenue and other financing side of things, right? So we will continue to look at using fund balance, you know, our reserves. We have the LIPA issue that we're paying attention to, and so that will inform some of the decisions that we make as we, you know, as we move deeper into this process. But we're looking to, you know, we've always laid out the usage plan on our reserves, and so we're continuing to follow that plan. And then we will, we'll keep you posted on all of this stuff. Okay, are there any questions? But right now, we're about $700,000 off of a balanced budget. So we're continuing to work on that.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Okay,
Okay, so that's where we are.
all right. That's the plan. Okay, so we'll move on to regular business.
Sure.
Trustees, action item C is personnel. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor? Action D, donation from our Athletics Booster Club to rebuild the bullpen for $3,000. Do I have a motion? Yes.
Motion.
And motion and a second. Questions? Thank you to the Booster Club. All in favor? E is the approval of budget transfers, primarily for support for E&L students and in special education of $260,500. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
And that was the second. Questions?
Yes.
Dave?
Just curious, this was a influx of funds to the middle school level. That's just based on individual student needs, different staffing changes, or what can you tell me about that?
It's programmatic. So when last year we reallocated TAs from the elementary program to the middle and high school program.
Okay.
And that was around program, right? And so when we budget for them on an elementary line, and then this year when we go to pay them, we want to pay them out of the middle school line, so we transfer those funds off of the one personnel line to the other.
Okay, and the estimate for 2021 will be roughly, if you had to guess? Make up for this, or?
So we had to build in some of those TAs, right, into that drives some of what we've been doing what we've been doing here, because originally in last year's budget we had anticipated being down 5 TAs,
Okay.
and we ended up needing 3 of the 5.
Okay.
Right. So
Okay. Because we're always trying to minimize the budget transfer.
absolutely.
So
Yeah.
going in, we should have a sense of where that's going to be for next year.
Yeah, so when we build the, Olivia and I were talking about this today, right? So we're always talking about how do we minimize the transfer, but then how do we build a budget, 18 months ahead of when we need it, that anticipates the money on the right lines.
Mhm.
And so those two things are often in conflict with one another. So we're trying.
We're trying. I mean, it's kind of, we are trying to break the budget down to specific details because of, we are also required to do the transparency report where we have to ensure that there's equity in the funding between buildings. So we have to be very specific. Once people move because of program, then the whole thing comes apart. So the money has to follow where they are.
Okay. All right, thank you.
All in favor? Action F is the award of bids for capital reserve and capital projects. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second? Questions? All in favor?
These are the projects from last year.
That we
get
got,
bids
right,
on.
yes.
Right.
We're all kind of excited, really. I know
So
you
we're-
couldn't tell, but we are.
Yes, we are.
Action G is approval of the change order. This is from Ultimate Power. This is a deduction. Do I have a motion? Second?
Second.
All in favor? Figured y'all were good with that one. H is the approval of the agreement with Business Information Solutions for the textbook management database. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second? Questions?
I have a question. So if we have a textbook management system, why do we pay a stipend for textbooks management?
Olivia, do you want to grab?
I thought, I had sent in a question earlier
Yeah.
too, that I thought we already did this agreement at the beginning of the year and we had
There are
this.
two textbook management systems. We have a bunch of the private and local schools that go through BOCES. That's the textbook central.
That's the one we did at the beginning?
That's the one that we did in July. There are few school districts that still come to us in central office to pick books. And we have to link the purchasing. We gather all the information from the school through this database and then link it to WinCap to generate the purchase orders to purchase the book. There are a few of them, so we still carry some books in the basement of central office. This is the one that we are talking about, not the ones that the parents have to go to BOCES to pick the books. And this gentleman developed this program for us years ago. He doesn't come very often. Last 2 years he was sick. But this time we needed an update, so we have to bring him in to come and do it for us, to link it to WinCap.
And it integrates with WinCap?
It still doesn't answer my question why we have a stipend for textbook management when we have systems in place.
Well, the technology can't do it by itself. We still need a person who has to administer all that. So this is Kathy.
Kathy is paid, she's the one who actually collects all the
Right.
requests from the private schools. Are you talking about the one at the high school, or you're talking about?
I'm talking about the one at the high school. We have an additional stipend for
Oh,
textbook
that-
management
Oh.
at the high school.
All right, that stipend has to do with the internal books that we have. I understand what you're saying. Let us look into that and we'll get back to you on it, if you don't mind.
Thank you.
Okay. More questions? All in favor? I'll combine actions I through N, which are all special education related. Do I have a motion? And there was a second. Questions? I'll give you a second. You think we're good? All right, all in favor? Action O is the IEPs. Do I have a motion? And a second? All in favor? P is approval of the stipulation of settlements. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second? All in favor? And Q is the approval between North Shore and TK Tours for the high school's trip to Washington and the middle school's trip to Philadelphia. Do I have a motion? Second? Do you have questions? All in favor? This brings us to our second comments from the public. If anyone here would like to approach the podium and address the board? All right. We'll close public comment. Old business. What?
You think it's all?
I was like, there's some, please.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we've constructed goals for our LAC committee this year, and we're already in January. Are we going to? Are we going to wait until we know what the LIPA situation is? We have a little more clarity on that and how we can utilize those individuals as working advocates. I don't want to lose anybody from LAC.
At the beginning of the year, we did.
We didn't have the same free-form collection of goals and discussions this year. I think we kind of said that it was going to be a continuum of where they had been, really focusing on the legislative breakfast, which has been the focus that we're putting together. We're going to have a meeting next Tuesday to plan for that. But we did discuss, this is why I think it does fit under old business, the idea that as at our special public meeting regarding the potential LIPA resolution, that LAC could potentially be employed as an arm of the board. So I don't think we're there yet, but the board can discuss. But I think that would be a very important use for them when that time is ready, personally.
My fear is that
And
the
it's what they've
individuals who are
done
on
in the past.
LAC are going to start to feel antsy and like, why am I doing this?
Well, to that, the legislative breakfast, like, we're having a work session, so
Okay.
we are focused on that to keep that from happening, to leverage the connections folks have, and bring people together and really make that a really unique event. In the past, as I think you know it, I'm sure you know, had been done by, in conjunction with other super LACs at neighboring districts. This is gonna be a North Shore-centric event, which was somewhat free, it's still free, but is a little more focused with the LIPA situation coming in front of us. So we're really going to try to focus on that with our legislators, both at the state and county level. So I think that's that project. But I think once that's done, and we have a work session planned for the 15th, another work session as a backup if needed 1 week later on the 22nd, just to make sure we get everything done, and then having the event, and then after that, I think they will need our
Some
direction.
stuff. So do you want us to plan to have our thoughts together on that for the next meeting even? Before the budget really?
Peter, do you know offhand the two potential dates that we are talking about? Or I don't know, but I did. Yeah. February 1st or 8th. Okay. So yeah, we could discuss it either on the 23rd of January or the 6th of February, neither of which would be before LAC was ready to move on to the next topic.
Right. January 23rd, I assume is lighter. Fine.
Great with me?
Bring thoughts. Other old business?
So we'll add that as a discussion item.
I would bullet it under, is it a full discussion item or is it like
necessarily.
a bullet under old?
Old business.
We're gonna do, well, we also have committee reports, we could put it under there too,
So, yeah,
under the committee section.
yep, let's do that.
And Peter, you'll put a little, you'll tee it up in your board memo, so we're all,
I
comfortable
will.
do it? Thank you.
Old business?
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Anybody? New business?
What's going on with Viking Foundation?
So Viking Foundation. May I?
I wish you would.
Right. So Viking Foundation has been meeting this year. They have they have a new co-president, Maureen
Denley.
Denley. Thank you very much. They are working on their brand. They are working on becoming more visible. We are Chris and I are working in collaboration with them to help them set up a mini micro grant program that teachers can put, proposals in for innovative ideas, and that the foundation would then fund. They've set aside some money to do that, and we talked with them about getting that off the ground in the new year. So that's what they're doing. They're looking for ways to, do some fundraising, and I think they know that in order to, raise funds, they have to, give some funds out and be visible and relevant and present. And they are a really hardworking, terrific group of people. So
We should have them do the online donations where people can donate $10 a month, $20.
Yep.
All the schools do it for New alumni, and like WFUV does it, and it's people don't feel donating $10 or $15 or $20 a month. It's like their coffee, right? But for someone to get out and donate, and they could do it on their credit card, they don't have to think about it. For people to then write a check for $1,000 or $5,000, that at one time, they feel that. It's like a payment plan.
Yep.
So
That's very
they're in a good place.
I was going to mention that I am somewhat excited about the new voting law and the reference in your board update that
right.
we are going to pre-register 16-year-olds. And this year, I guess, also the 17-year-olds that
Well,
are called in the middle.
I don't know. They could be eligible for the draft. You may want to think about that.
They could be eligible for the draft whether they vote or not, so.
So
But
Chris
they
and,
know where you are if you register.
That's true. Chris
They're
and
all going to drive. They're going to know.
Chris and Seth Gordon have been working on this is a new regulation, and so are working on the process of how we're going to do this year, and the board, it is required that the board have a policy around this, that we received a sample policy from Fraser Feldman on this. We are working on some tweaks and customizations on that policy, which we will present to the policy committee, which is meeting next Tuesday or Wednesday or something like that, one day next week. Probably, I think you're right.
We already did something for 18-year-olds, didn't we?
We used to do
In
it
the social
in
studies
senior
class?
year in social studies class. They always registered. They always had an opportunity to register for the vote, and they went through and the forms were given out
So it's
for
not
all
without
the senior social studies classes.
right, precedent.
And a lot of the kids took advantage of that.
Yep.
Had I known there might be a draft, I would have told them not to register.
Okay, so I'm excited about that. I did want to ask, and I meant to ask before, the high school DC trip,
Yes.
not to what extent is this part of the curriculum of the class is what I was curious about.
I have all of the paperwork in my office.
Have they always done this?
They have been going the past couple of years. No, it's reasonably new. Chris, what do you want to jump
It
in?
I don't remember
started
seeing that
when
contract.
Maram McBrook taught spin as a senior program, and then she did keep it going when she was teaching. Now it's the senior Echo Gov, that's non-IB, non-AP. It's like regular Regents Track social studies. And so they did not do it last year. But
I thought they did do it last year.
I don't remember the
There
contract.
was no contract for it. Did we not pay for it?
Maybe it was the year before.
I think it was the year before.
Maybe it was the year before.
And then, so she was bringing it back this year.
Yeah.
So it's about 50 students who are in those three,
Yep,
in her
it's-
three classes.
Yeah, it is absolute. It's supplemental to what they're doing in government classes. And I would have to look at the number of students who go versus who don't. But it's one of those reasonably affordable
Do you think it's see the Supreme
trips.
Court arguments for the Supreme Court? Because that was always a great thing to do.
I don't think it was on the agenda. It was in
I
there.
can double check
What's the question?
If they got to see a Supreme Court.
Yeah, I don't think it was on there.
Yeah, I have to look at the itinerary. I have the full itinerary. We have the full itinerary with the request that comes in. So I'm not sure. It was probably also in the contract.
It was, yeah.
Right?
We have it.
They're probably going to see the monuments.
Yeah, there's a lot of monuments.
And the museums, there are a lot of museums.
Congressman Suozzi will meet with groups if he has a good, if you plan ahead. Yep.
Says-
So they're going to the Capitol. They are going to the Supreme Court and the Library of Congress. They are going to the International Spy Museum. They are going to the White House. And then they are going to the Jefferson Memorial.
Like all the memorials.
The
not just-
MLK Memorial, the Lincoln Memorial, the Washington Monument, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, and the Korean Memorial. It's a lot of walking. And then the second day, they'll
Can you give phys ed credit for it too, then? People should really be more creative.
maybe not. The next day, they will go to the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, the Changing of the Guard, the Kennedy grave sites, the Iwo Jima Memorial, and then they will go to the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History, which is actually, if you haven't been, a very cool place. So it's a good trip.
Other new business? Yes.
I wanted to mention, this morning I saw a YouTube video that was posted, and, excuse me, it was for the club and your presentation on building. Kids did an excellent job, and your training was a little effective ago, and kids did a great job.
They did do a good job. And so we're in the process of getting that link onto the website.
It was posted by someone on Facebook. Lisa Alvarez,
Great.
All right. Anything else? Motion to adjourn?
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.